I wanted to give you guys insight into how we structure calorie intake and macro structure for our beginners at Move. First step is we determine resting metabolic rate. Second step is we determine activity level. Okay, it's called PAL, physical activity level. Once we take into consideration resting metabolic rate and physical activity level, we have a good starting point for approximate calorie intake, and it's important to remember that that's just a starting point. It's not a forever point. From there, we prioritize protein. Typically, we'll structure protein between 1.5 and 2 grams per kilo. Now that depends on someone coming in. So a lot of folks come to see us and their protein intake's historically been very low. So what we're not going to do is put them on the higher end of intake, because that's very uncomfortable from a digestive standpoint, and it's also kind of awkward from a food system standpoint. Basic starting point for most, 1.5 to 2 grams per kilo. Someone that's just getting their training going. For folks that are training 5, 6, 7 days a week and they're used to higher protein intake, we'll generally structure that between about 2.5 grams per kilo. So protein's been accounted for. Now we look at carbs, and we're certainly not in the carbs are bad camp here. But there's sort of 3 categories that people fall into. If you're overweight, metabolically unhealthy, and you're new to training, obviously we're not going to put you on a higher carbohydrate diet. Rather, we're going to structure carbs to probably be somewhere between 15 and 30% of your intake after we've accounted for protein. On the other side of the coin, if you're a hard-charging athlete training most days of the week, chances are good we're going to have to address the fact that your carb intake's too low. We run into that all the time, and that's kind of just left over from the carbs are bad generation. So usually with athletes who are training multiple times a day and multiple days out of the week, we're going to structure carb intake in the 40 to 50% range. So in the middle of folks that are overweight and metabolically unhealthy, and those that are not overweight, quite lean, training regularly, we've kind of got just your average person. They're not necessarily training a lot right now, but they want to start, and realistic training is 2 to 3 days a week, and they're relatively healthy. We're going to structure carb intake, again, depending on additional factors, roughly 20 to 30% of intake from total calories. All right, so now we've got approximate calorie intake, we've prioritized protein, we're fitting carbs in based on someone's metabolic health and training. Now we're left obviously with fats. Now, fats are typically going to come in around 0.8 grams per kilo. However, that number can go up or down, again, depending on various factors. But for us, we just want to teach people how to get healthy fats in the diet. So we're looking at stuff like olive oil, avocado oil, nuts and seeds, seafood, good quality dairy. If and when supplemental fats are needed, things like omega-3s come into play on a regular basis. So again, I just wanted to give you a very fast, very basic overview of how we begin to structure nutrition for our beginners. Remember, there's a starting point. It's not a forever point. So if you're starting off on the point of overweight, unhealthy, haven't trained, your starting calorie intake and your macros are not going to be the same in a year, or at least that's not our hope. We want you to go from being overweight, unhealthy, no idea what you're doing, to one of those absolutely strong in the middle folks that trains 2 to 3 times a week, metabolically healthy, winning in life, and all that. So just remember, starting point for your intake and your macros, it's a start point. It's not a forever point. It should evolve as you evolve.